Hello everyone, just a quick PSA before we get into it. I had a completely different video scheduled for today that I've been putting together for the past couple of weeks, but a certain interview with a small-time actress you may have heard of, her name is Daisy Ridley, started making the rounds this week, and people on Twitter were having what I can only describe as a total meltdown over this interview. Although to be fair, total meltdowns are pretty commonplace on Twitter, so that's really not all that unusual. With that said, I watched this interview in its entirety, and while Daisy doesn't discuss Star Wars all that much, during the brief segment where she does discuss it, she decides to say something that I really don't think anyone over at Disney would have wanted her to say, because it outright confirms what most of us have suspected from the beginning, that Disney had absolutely no idea what they were doing with the sequel trilogy. They had no plan whatsoever.
So, Daisy, I want to ask you, I just found this out. Have you been keeping Rey's secret from the beginning? Did you know about the parentage? Like, tell me about that journey of when you found out.
No. At the beginning, there was toying with like an Obi-Wan connection, and then it really went, there were like different versions, and then it really went to that she was no one. And then it came to episode 9, and JJ pitched me the film and was like, oh yeah, Palpatine's granddaddy. And I was like, awesome. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, we're not sure. So it kept changing. So then even I was filming and I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be.
Now, if you didn't catch everything that was said, I wrote it out for you guys word for word on screen, so there's no misunderstanding here. I will admit this video turns into a bit of a rant. As a fan, it really sucks to hear how, when Disney bought the franchise, creating a good trilogy was not the priority. Priority number one was making fat stacks of cash as quickly as possible with little regard to quality, which I get into it a little more later, but in Bob Iger's book, who was the Disney CEO, it's very apparent that that was the only focus, was making that money back as soon as humanly possible, and the quality, well, that's secondary, or maybe even tertiary, who knows, it's way down on the priority list. I think we all knew just from watching the films that there was no plan, there was no vision, but the fact that it goes so far as to major elements of the film being flipped back and forth while the conclusion of the trilogy was in the middle of filming is something that's almost beyond belief. Not to mention that Disney doesn't seem to have any issue directly lying to fans' faces. I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, who apparently thinks everyone on planet Earth is too stupid to see the obvious truth, said many times during Rise of Skywalker interviews that nope, the speculation is all wrong, you guys are silly. Disney had always been planning on bringing back Palpatine as Papa Palps from the very beginning.
The big shocker in this trailer, of course, the reappearance of Palpatine. What can you tell us about this? How long was this in the cards? Was this sort of in the blueprint from Episode 7?
This has been in the blueprint for a long time.
Liar! The only way to describe that is as an outright lie. I never bought it in the first place, like I think most people didn't, but until now I just gave her the benefit of the doubt because that's how I operate. Anyway, now that we know for a fact that what we've been told is nothing more than a complete fabrication, I just have to say that it is a failure from the most fundamental meaning of the word for Disney to just take a franchise like this one, buy it off of old George for $4 billion, and then have no plan whatsoever for how you're going to continue the story from one of, if not the most, beloved trilogies of all time. I recently read Bob Iger's autobiography. If you don't know, Iger was, until very recently, the Disney CEO. In the book, there's an entire chapter dedicated to Iger trying to convince George to sell off the Star Wars franchise. In that chapter, Iger admits that they had already set the release date for Episode 7 before they had even begun writing the script or finalized the deal. They were already planning on how they could get that money back as fast as humanly possible, with no regard to the actual quality of the film, which just plays right into what Daisy is saying in her interview. By the way, there was only 2.5 years between Disney buying the franchise and the Force Awakens release. That's it, 2.5 years, which is insane to think they pushed it out that quickly and with that little care. There was no plan going into The Force Awakens. They set a release date before they even had a script, and everything was rushed through to meet that deadline no matter the cost, which is why that movie feels the way it does. Because they had no plans, things were changing on the fly every step of the way, and what's downright sad is that they didn't learn their lesson from what was criticized about Episode 7, and the lack of an overarching vision for the trilogy hurt every single film, and to say it shows up in the final product is the understatement of the century. I will say, despite everything, I would have at least expected them to have Rey's parentage down before they started filming the conclusion to their trilogy. I mean, come on, is this a college fan film that inexperienced students are cobbling together between their shifts at Taco Bell? Or is this Star Wars, owned by the last company on Earth that should be cheaping out on the films that were supposed to set the foundation for everything moving forward? Whether you hate the sequels with a fiery passion, or just like to pretend they don't exist, or even enjoy them, I think every single person can agree that they should have had a plan before they started filming the first movie, let alone the conclusion to the trilogy. I mean, you hire JJ to make the first movie, who did episode 7 his way, then you bring in old Rian Johnson for episode 8, who in turn axes off who was at one point going to be the trilogy's main antagonist, and also says, hey, Rey is a nobody, she's just absurdly powerful because, look, a kid with a broom. Alright, I guess. Then Disney axes the original episode 9 director, brings back JJ, who cobbles together something with little attention to detail because he just had a month, and because of the backlash to The Last Jedi, proceeds to pull a 180 on what most of episode 8 did. Hey, Rey is actually a Palpatine, isn't that neat? Oh, you didn't like Grumpy Luke and his green titty milk? Well, I don't know why, but here's just a quick scene that's a blatant shot at the last movie. Oh, also, by the way, Snoke was homegrown by Palpatine like a chia pet, isn't that cool? How should we explain Palpatine's return? I don't know, why don't we just have someone say, somehow, Palpatine's returned? And that's it. Also, we'll mention in the movie that Palpatine's return was broadcast throughout the galaxy, but we won't show it in the film. We'll host a Fortnite event.
At last the work of generations is complete. The great error is corrected. The day of victory is at hand. The day of revenge. The day of the Sith.
I mean, I'm sorry guys, if you love the sequel trilogy, I'm happy for you. Seriously, I am. I wish I did. But Daisy Ridley just outright admitting that they were still changing major elements of the trilogy during the filming of the finale is just... Disney would have been so much better off if they had just taken a couple extra years for the big new installment in the main saga and made their first movie or two the spin-offs. Release Rogue One in 2015, another spin-off the next year if they really had to stick to the one movie a year formula. That way they are showing investors that, hey, we're already making fat stacks and the best is on the horizon. Then you can get your sequel trilogy in proper order, have a coherent vision from the beginning, and in turn have a solid foundation for the decades of Star Wars content that we are sure to get. We have seen that there is still a lot of talent at Disney-era Lucasfilm. The Mandalorian was very good. Season 7 of The Clone Wars managed to stick the landing perfectly, and Dave Filoni, the guy gets it. In complete contrast, you watch the sequel trilogy, and the fact that they had no plan could not be more apparent. Disney tried their best to hide it while the film was in production, but the truth is coming out. These actors are under no obligation to keep quiet anymore. Just last week, John Boyega decided to bury Disney in an interview. I mean, he put Mickey Mouse in an unmarked grave when he discussed how badly they failed with his character and how badly they failed him. Mark Hamill as well, the guy is just a loose cannon, and many times he said things you can't explain away. He was not happy with the way Luke was portrayed in The Last Jedi. The worst thing is they had one shot to get this right, and they blew it in my opinion. Peter Mayhew is gone, Carrie Fisher is gone, and that of course is not Disney's fault, but they had one chance with the original cast. There's no do-overs here, and if they had just taken their time, it would have solved so many issues. What's so frustrating is how easily this all could have been avoided. I mean, if there was something to take your time on so you get it right, it was this, but well, we're long past that. Well guys, that is going to do it for today's video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I know I don't talk movies all that often on this channel, but when it came to this, I wasn't mad, I was just disappointed, and this is how I am expressing my disappointment. Also, we do have a sponsor for today's video, Displate. Now, Displate has been a mainstay on the channel for a few months now, and for good reason. As most of you probably know by now, Displate creates licensed metal posters that are seriously awesome. Displate has just about everything: Star Wars, DC, Marvel, all officially licensed prints, which means Displates are of the highest quality. I have well over a dozen at this point, and the detail and quality of every single print has been off the charts, and the install is so easy, it's just a magnet. Displate also just sent me a new shipment a few days ago so I could show it off to you guys, including 4 displates of my favorite films for my movie room, as well as a huge displate for The Empire Strikes Back's 40th anniversary. I also picked out 2 displates to represent 2 of my favorite albums, and they also sent me another Witcher displate, which I very much appreciated, as The Witcher 3 is my favorite single-player game of all time. This week only, you can score yourself a massive discount of 30% off your entire order just by using my link in the description below. You don't need to use a code or anything like that, just use my link and you'll get that 30% discount, but only for the next 7 days. If you've had your eye on displates for a while, now is the perfect opportunity to pick some up, as 30% is the largest displate discount I've ever been able to get for you guys. Alright, thank you once again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.